Ah, my intrepid explorers of the unknown. George Booza here, the voice of Beast from X-Men, the animated series in X-Men 97. Oh, my stars and garters, an adventure awaits at the Uncanny Experience. We're commandeering the Minneapolis Club this September 28th and 29th, metamorphosing it into the Grand Xavier Institute. Join us for a symposium of panels, a mutant marketplace, esteemed celebrity meet and greets, an illustrious cosplay contest, the exclusive Hellfire Club, all followed by the after party in the mansion. Procure your tickets at theuncannyexperience.com. Together, let's leap into the boundless realms of imagination and knowledge. Get your tickets now at theuncannyexperience.com.
Bum bum bottom 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 bum bum doobie doobie da 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 doobie doobie da 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 doobie doobie da 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 bum bum bottom bum bum doobie doobie da 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 doobie doobie da 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 doobie doobie da 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 bum bum bottom bottom bum bum bottom ba da 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 ba da
You are now in session with the Comic Book Couples Counseling Podcast. I'm Lisa Gullickson.
And I'm Brad Gullickson.
And each month we evaluate a different iconic romance within the four-color realm. And in this episode, do you like pina coladas and getting caught in the rain? Now, I'm a fan of pina coladas. However, I do like them how I like my unmarried teens, as virgins in our Creator Corner. I did not think about how that sounded when I wrote that introduction. We're talking to writer Jordan Morris about Youth Group from First Second Books. I did not.
Oh, I like it. I like it so much, though. I actually hit Mickey Mouse level of voiceover there. That's how much I liked it, Lisa. And I needed that. I needed that coming out of our screening of Steel Magnolias at the Alamo Drafthouse in Winchester, Virginia. We took our nibblings to see that film. Their request, by the way.
Yes.
But neither Lisa nor I had ever seen the movie before.
And as it turned out, had no idea what it was actually about.
Yeah, and I don't even necessarily want to spoil what the movie is about. I would not want to rob anyone like us who would wander into that film and then just be utterly devastated by it. But it was also kind of like a really fascinating viewing experience for me because when we purchased the tickets, it was nearly sold out already. And you and our two nibblings were in the back row, and I had to sit away from you, like 3 rows down by myself. And so here I am watching Steel Magnolias, not really aware of how you and our nibblings are experiencing it. And I had ordered the Carolina Reaper buffalo cauliflower bits.
You did.
And, I devoured it like a monster during the pre-show. I can't wait for the movie to actually start. I got all this super hot sauce on my fingers, and I had wiped it off on the napkins. And then the movie starts, and, for the first third, it's all fun and games in the hair parlor. But then things start to turn tragic, and I start crying, and I reach for the napkins. They've got the Carolina Reaper barbecue sauce on them. I rub the sauce into my eyes, and then I nearly died watching Steel Magnolias.
I believe even without the Carolina Reaper sauce directly to the eye holes, I feel like I must have cried an equal amount as you, but not with the same abandon, because
Right.
I was the adult in the situation.
Yeah.
It's with a lot of guilt that we've been bringing our nibblings to the movies so much, because I feel like for their tiny years, I showed very little interest in them. Even though they live not that far away, I would only see them maybe 3-4 times a year.
Right, but you were like,
teenagers now.
babies, gross.
Yeah,
You don't want
boring.
anything coming out of their bodies and onto you.
But now they are becoming adults, and I'm curious about what they're actually interested in, but also have no idea. So far, the movies we've taken them to are Mandy,
Yes.
Scott Pilgrim versus the World,
Yes.
An Interview with a Vampire.
Yes.
And Steel Magnolias.
Yes. I think they're...
all visceral experiences in one way or the other.
To me, it says great things about our nibblings. Their tastes are eclectic, they're curious, they're comfortable with classic cinema.
Though during Mandy, our nephew did lean over and say, Aunt Lisa, just be aware you're about to see a penis.
And
I was
he wasn't wrong.
He wasn't wrong. I did see that penis, and I had to tell him, oh, I've already seen Mandy. I've seen this penis.
Yeah, and then he said, well, don't tell Uncle Brad.
Tell Brad.
Brad had also already seen that penis.
Yeah. Though, to be fair, when I saw Mandy the first time, I think I slept through the penis.
Yeah, well, we saw it at a midnight screening, and you don't do too well with those.
I don't. I get snoozy.
But I bring this all up because I found it to be a rather profound experience. This was the first time where a young person, two young people, had introduced me to something old that I had not seen before, filled in a cinematic gap, and I was like, this movie? This is a heart film. Yes, it is devastating, and I don't think I've ever cried so much in a theater, and part of that was in response to the Carolina Reaper sauce on my eyeballs.
Hot eyes.
But I think I still would have cried just as much, but maybe not as painfully as I did then. But beyond all the tears, I found the film to be beautiful, filled with crackerjack dialogue, expertly directed, expertly performed. And yeah, I'm folding this one in, so I have a lot to thank for our nibblings.
And the fact that they brought this movie to us going like, this is one of my favorite movies.
Right. Yeah, they had seen it before and we had not.
Right. And they're like, this is me. This is me on the screen. And like, they've had none of those life experiences and yet they still see themselves. I think that that's just magical.
Yeah, it was awesome. So if you've never seen Steel Magnolias, or if it's been a little while since you've seen Steel Magnolias, that's our cinematic wreck of the week.
With our nibbling and Steel Magnolias, I see them projecting themselves into the future and going like, when I'm an old person, I want this. I want this kind of friendship. I want this kind of community.
Yeah, and I agreed.
And with youth group, I am projecting myself back in time to the young person I was who was going to youth group, even though my experience was very different from what Jordan and Bowen represented this book.
Nice segue, Lisa.
Thank you.
We are talking about Youth Group, which comes out on July 16th from First Second Books. They're pitching it with this logline: Buffy the Vampire Slayer meets the chilling adventures of Sabrina in this darkly funny YA graphic novel. Because the book doesn't come out for another month, in this conversation, we will not spoil anything, but we will get deeply personal about our teenage years and some of the people on this podcast's youth group experiences. And I do think this conversation serves very well as a hype machine for the book itself. We love Jordan Morris. He was on the show a couple of years ago with artist Tony Cliff talking about his graphic novel Bubble. We recently appeared on his other podcast, Free with Ads, with Emily Fleming, talking about Tank Girl. Of course, a lot of people know Jordan as Cotton Candy Randy from Good Mythical Morning. He's written for numerous television programs, including Jellystone on Max. Lisa first introduced me to him through his other podcast, Jordan Jesse Go. Like, he is podcast royalty, and it's an honor to have him on Comic Book Couples Counseling.
It's always super fun talking to Jordan Morris, but I was really excited about delving into this book in particular, talking about youth group, because I remembered that back, maybe it was like 2018, I'm not going to look it up, but he did an episode of Good Christian Fun, which is a podcast hosted by Kevin Porter and Caroline Eli that talks about like Christian pop culture. And he mentioned that he opted into youth group. Like, he had friends that were going to a Christian youth group, and he was like, that sounds like fun. And he had this amazing time. And my experience was like completely different. So as many of you know, I was raised Catholic, and in the Catholic Church, you get to 8th grade and you get this sacrament called confirmation. And at that point, your CCD is over. And CCD was like, you know, your like weekly Christian formation classes. And my mom was like, well, you can't not go to church on a weekday. We need some kind of weekday activity. And so the first thought was to go to youth group. And at that time in my life, I had undiagnosed anxiety that was kind of being interpreted as like depression. So my mom was like, yeah, she's just got to get out there. And I really fought it. Like I fought going to youth group. And I remember my first time going and feeling so intensely awkward and self-conscious and not wanting to be there. And then, like, towards the end of the time, and it was like you're playing games and you're like being silly and you're praying, but you're not like doing prescribed prayers, which I was very comfortable with. I was never comfortable with like, dear Lord Jesus, thank you today for today. Like I could never like improv freeform prayer. It always made me like uncomfortable. And so, but the last activity was like, okay, you know, this is the first one of the season. Everybody go around the room and talk to someone you had never talked to before. And I got approached by this really tall, handsome Asian kid. Ooh. And he started talking to me, what's your name? You know, like that kind of stuff. And I was like, I can't believe this cute boy is talking to me. And then the youth group leader goes like, oh, that's all the time we have. And like literally like mid-sentence, this kid like peeled off and stopped talking to me. And I was like, I'm never going to this again. You know? And so I instead decided to do, for the past several days, I've been trying to remember what this was called.
Imagine if that boy had kept talking to you. Where would you be right now?
I have no idea. We would be married.
Yeah, that's what I think.
Because that, I think, is what youth group is for. I think it's a mating ritual.
Yeah, it's a hookup group.
Exactly. Yeah, so I decided to do the thing where, like, you sponsor someone who's getting sacraments. So I essentially just volunteered for, like, another, like, classroom setting. And then later, I had a friend in high school named Bruce, and he was super involved with youth group at another church, and my mom was like, okay, you can go to youth group with Bruce. And I would like dip in and dip out. So there's like a scene early in youth group where
the comic book
that where they're like filling out like posters of like, hey, you know, if you're tempted towards sin, like masturbation, choose another activity like crochet. I don't know. I'm just saying that because I'm crocheting all of the time right now.
Playing the flute.
Exactly. And there were activities like that where people were making these like super personal confessions. And I was like, please just like set me on fire. I just hated it. But like the hookup thing you were talking about, that is so ubiquitous when people talk about youth group now, but I literally had no idea that that was going on. And I was like racking my brain. I'm like, how did I miss out on that? I did one like lock-in / camp weekend one time. And
was it at Camp Hemlock?
No, but but you can that can be the placeholder for wherever we were because I can't remember, but it was something like that.
Yeah, Camp Hemlock's like the camp that all like elementary school kids visit
and you
in
have
Virginia.
to do team building exercises and stuff.
Trust falls,
and
zip lines.
Man, someday I have to tell the story of when the performing arts floor in college all did Hemlock together, and it just ended with a bunch of people scream crying. It was like ridiculous. I went to one of these weekends. And I was like, how come I never made out with anybody or made any friends? And I realized, like, you know, they would give me, like, an agenda. They would, like, give you a schedule. And I would literally do every single thing on the schedule. But the second you're supposed to be, like, free socializing, I would just find a way to be alone. You know what I mean?
You'd lock yourself up.
Yeah, so I missed out on all of that because
Yeah.
I was like so antisocial.
It's fascinating, you know, me approaching a book like Youth Group. You know, I grew up in a secular household for the most part, and I find, you know, all of this stuff very weird, for lack of a better word. And I approach a comic like Youth Group pretty skeptically because I don't trust a youth group system.
Right.
Clearly, they're going to be the bad guys of this story. And one of the joys of this book is having those biases of mine challenged by Jordan Morris and Bowen McCurdy. And yeah, I did not like I think I even say this to Jordan. I don't think I was even necessarily thinking I was going to enjoy a youth group Buffy the Vampire Slayer mashup comic just because of who I am. But the book won me over.
I think he does an amazing job. The team does an amazing job going like, you can go to youth group and have a really positive experience and still grow up to believe whatever you believe.
And you can be in that system and then discover a way to challenge that system and question its toxic impulses, its negative impulses.
Yeah, I think nowadays it is like the knee-jerk reaction to go like everybody in this group believes this one thing and is bad, and then so the only thing you can do is like completely disassociate with it, which I think for a lot of people is alienating.
Yeah,
particularly people who had really positive
you're
experiences for the most part.
A believer or you're an atheist, and I've discovered that's not the case.
Yeah, and I think where we take this conversation with Jordan is a really beautiful place, and a place like an area where I enjoy talking about it just like a lot.
Yeah.
I just really enjoy it.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It was fun for me to partake in this conversation, but mostly I felt a little bit like an outsider of this conversation, observing the two of you discussing your experiences. And I'm excited for our listeners to delve into the meat of this episode as well. But Lisa, before we do that...
Can I say one more thing?
Oh, yes.
Like,
yes,
I also
yes.
think it's really important
We have a
to
sponsorship,
say,
Lisa.
I know, it's so special. And I appreciate Omnibus so much. Have you not heard? They have many of the top publishers in comics today. But I do want to say, like, you don't have to have gone to a youth group to enjoy this book.
That's what I was saying. I'm that person.
Yeah.
Saying.
But you were saying like you felt alienated from the conversation.
Well, not that.
You felt like an
that's
outsider.
how I entered into the conversation. The same way that I entered into the book, right?
Oh, okay. Oh, maybe
and
I'm
both
not being
the
a
book
good listener. Sorry.
And the conversation won me over. Yeah. This is a second book,
yes.
right? They make great comics, and that should be along with Jordan Morris's association with this book. Those should be two factors. Like, there's something in this for you, no matter who you are, really, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Lisa, before we get into the conversation, what do we got to do?
Referrals.
Sponsored by Omnibus. Omnibus is a modern digital comic book store and reader app carrying your favorite single issues, volumes, and omnibuses all day and date. Just like your local comic book store, you pay per book, but digital.
Their focus is on building an excellent customer shopping and reading experience and using novel discovery features to help fans find their next new favorite book. They feature top-tier content and already have many of the top publishers in comics today.
In the spirit of helping people find their next new favorite book, we have our referrals segment. The idea is to give our counselees, that's you guys, further reading on the themes of the episode. Think of it as us sending you to specialists to further your healing journey through comic books. And right now, Omnibus is available to you no matter what you have, an iPhone, an Android, a browser. If you've got that, you've got access to Omnibus. They also have wish lists that you can put together now.
How fun.
And just this week, they launched their subscription service. So you can subscribe to comics.
Yeah, it's like a pull box.
Yeah. So for my referral, I wanted to find a comic that I thought embraced the Scooby Gangness of Youth Group. You know, Youth Group is about this young goth girl who goes to a youth group and discovers that their youth group is also actually fighting the forces of evil, fighting demons. And so I wanted a comic that kind of did something similar in that Buffy, Nancy Drew, Scooby Gang kind of way. And I decided to land on the new edition of The Case of the Missing Men, which is part 1 of the Hobtown mystery stories, which are currently being republished by Oni Press. They were originally published in black and white. I loved those books. But now here they are in color. They hired Jason Fisher Cohee to do those colors. It looks astonishing. And sometimes I can be a black and white snob. You know, I like Usagi Yojimbo in black and white. I don't like the new colored editions, but you know, that's capitalism for you. But this is a case in which I feel like the colors enhance the Nancy Drew-ness of it all. The book is written by Chris Burton and illustrated by Alexander Forbes, and it's very strange. It's, I would say, even stranger than Youth Group. The world of Hobtown is very Twin Peaks. And so I think you need to have a little bit of a love for the surreal and maybe even love David Lynch. Like, if you love David Lynch, you're good. But if you find David Lynch a little icky, a little too strange for you, proceed with caution on this recommendation, but if you vibe with it, you're going to vibe with it really hard, and that's who I am, and that's what I did.
A referral with caveats. I think that's a very good move.
Yeah.
Not every book is for every person.
That's true.
But there is a book for every person on Omnibus.
Okay. Well, what about your referral, Lisa? What do you got?
So I wanted to lean into the religious aspect, the exploration of like faith and religiosity and like what does it mean? How do we fit it into our lives? Is it something that can ultimately become obsolete? So I picked Grizz Grobus.
Yeah, I love Grizz Grobus.
This book is by Simon Roy, co-written with Jess Pollard, and it takes place in the Habitat universe. And so the planet this book takes place on is a planet that had been terraformed, and they are starting to deforest it. And as they're deforesting, they're finding artifacts from the previous colonizations. And one of the artifacts is this robot priest called Grizz Grobus. And they refurbish him, and now he is walking around and going like, why doesn't anybody believe what I'm saying anymore? Like it's just obsolete. And then it also contains a story within a story that is a novel that's very popular on that planet. And I think it's just like an interesting way to think about all colonies, all communities of thought are based on ideas that are not like literally true. But then there's just people who just kind of overcommit to those ideas.
Right.
And it creates weirdness and conflict over something that's kind of hypothetical.
Yeah, we actually spoke to Simon Roy a few weeks ago about his most recent Kickstarter campaign, which was on Refugium, a sequel to Grizz Grobus. That book is the book that really digs into, what have we done to this planet as a species? Grizz Grobus was a Kickstarter from a year ago or a few years ago. We backed it. We have this beautiful hardcover.
We copped a fizz.
We copped a fizz. But it is now available this year to a mass audience. And I think Simon Roy is a beautiful cartoonist with a really unique style. He draws a lot from Soviet comedies. So even the humor is a little detached from what we're in the Western world, in the American world used to. So I just love all the influences on it. And again, I love the design of it.
And I like that this takes place in the same universe as his darker stories, because every post-utopian world is going to react kind of differently. And this is a more rural world where everything turns out to be a little bit more wholesome. I said wholesome weird. Wholesome. Wholesome is a way to say far less cannibalism.
Than in Habitat.
Yeah.
Love that recommendation. Love my recommendation. Both of those books are currently available on Omnibus.
Oh, do I do the thing now? Referrals.
Now on to the main topic of the episode, Youth Group, which hits shops on July 16th from First Second Books. Lisa, what do our listeners need to know to bring context to this conversation with Jordan Morris?
Against her very will, Kay goes to Youth Group. She meets Meg Parks, who is kind of like the Youth Group leader who tries to stay bubbly and optimistic. And then also Cortland, who is like the youth pastor with a past, like he found Christ like later in life. So he still has like that little bad boy stank about him. And she begins getting involved with the demon fighting. But the thing with the demon fighting is that it's actually getting out of hand. So against the recommendation of their leader, Pastor Doug, they decide to go to the youth groups of the other faiths to combine their powers to keep these demons at bay. I think our listeners should also know that the youth group that Kay, Meg, and Cortland are in are kind of like vaguely Christian-y evangelical.
Yeah, that's basic plot stuff. That's basic character stuff. Again, we don't spoil any of the good stuff that you'll discover in Youth Group.
And don't forget, as we're talking and we get soups serious, this book is actually fun and funny. There is jokes.
Yeah.
There is demon fighting.
Yeah, Jordan Morris
there is kicking and punching.
has found himself on Comic Book Couples Counseling, and we take things very seriously.
Because that's how I have fun.
Jordan, welcome back to Comic Book Couples Counseling. Hello.
Hi, thanks for having me back. Always good to talk to y'all.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so excited to talk about youth group. I was a person who dipped in and out of various youth groups, but I never stuck to one. I am also a prolific podcast listener. I listen to everything. You had done an episode or 3 of Good Christian Fun.
Yes.
And so I went back. I went back and listened to the 2018 episode where you're talking about Five Iron Frenzy. And you mentioned at the beginning of the little interview portion that your religious background was something that you were a little uncomfortable talking about. Like it was a little weird for you to talk about.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering what got you from, this is a little bit weird to talk about, to writing youth group and putting yourself in the position of talking about it all of the time.
Yeah. No. Well. To answer your question, I'm now uncomfortable all the time.
Okay, great.
I'm uncomfortable now. I feel like there's bugs on me. I'm gonna pretend my internet went out and shut my laptop. No. Yeah. This has been such an interesting exercise in revisiting that part of my life. So I am not typically someone who I'm not typically a very personal writer, right? I think anything you write has a little bit of you in it, whether it's, ad copy or a social media post or something, whatever. I mean, there's something of you in it because you came up with it. But I've never been one to write memoir or I did a little bit of open mic stand up when I first moved to LA, and none of it was about my personal life. It was just goofy one-liners and basically just reading tweets on stage, and it's not that I don't like that kind of writing, it's just never kind of been my thing. But yeah, I love, I love a good memoir, I love a good hyper personal stand-up set, but it's just kind of never been my thing. I think when I do my own stuff, let me rephrase that. And when I'm writing from a concept that I've come up with, as opposed to writing for a TV show, which is something I also do, it's not about, oh, I want to tell this personal story. I'm kind of just following a funny idea. And youth group kind of just started out as an idea that amused me. I was in one of these kind of hip youth groups growing up, and I always thought they were funny, weird, kind of emotionally loaded places. And I just never saw them portrayed in media in a way that I thought got what was funny and weird about them, right? They were always kind of broad, and they were always kind of punchliney, and the religious people were very cartoony and one note. And whereas I like that stuff a lot, I think those can be funny kinds of jokes, and having ridiculous religious people can be very funny. It I don't know, it never seemed to get at what I thought was so funny and weird about those places. So I had always just kind of wanted to write about youth groups. And so in thinking about oh, what's a fun way to write about these, I just kind of had the notion that what if these goobers actually had to do exorcisms? Because people still do exorcisms. I think that's kind of a dark thing that is, has some darkness behind it. But it is weird to think that in our modern days people are chanting and pulling demons out of people, or they think they think they're chanting and they think they're pulling demons out of people. So I just kind of had the notion, what if these goofballs that I grew up with actually had to do exorcisms on the side? And this kind of Christian who is hey, church can be anywhere. It can be out on the surfboard. You can be nailing a kickflip and then give a big up to JC because he's the one who gave you the power to do that kickflip. What if those types had to actually fight demons? It was just a funny idea to me. And so I pitched that idea over to Callista Brill over at First Second, my editor, and one of the great editors I worked on with Bubble over there. And the pitch I gave her was set in modern times. People had the internet and cell phones and stuff like that. And she read the pitch and she's like, I like this, but what if you set it in the 90s? You're clearly using a lot of your personal experience for this pitch. What if you set it in the 90s? So totally her idea. And yeah, and I thought that was fun. Who doesn't love to remember the 90s and Jenkos and the brief summer where we were all swing dancing for some reason? The 90s, they were weird.
I could swing dancing. Just have to put that in. I did.
Me too. Oh yeah, sure.
How fun.
I can still do it when I like have a little bit to drink at a wedding. I can like break out some old swing dance moves.
Oh yeah, the
like,
Lindy Hop. It goes
sure.
with a lot of time signatures and a fun and swingy thing to do.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. Yeah, it takes like it takes like 2 open bar tequilas for that part of my brain to unlock and for all the swing dance moves to come flooding back. But ooh, they're in there from that one summer where we were all money, baby. Good times.
Now that I can relate to. I watched a lot of swingers and incorporated a lot of swingers into my life.
Oh yes, Brad, I see your Aloha shirt that you're wearing over the Zoom.
That's right.
Clearly a man who has seen swingers more than once. Same here. I also have a closet full of Aloha shirts, and I consider myself to be very money, baby. So what were we talking about? Oh yeah, setting it in the 90s. So I was happy to like make that change. I thought it was a fun idea, and then I like wrote the thing, and then when I like read it back, and when I was like seeing like Bowen's line art and stuff like that, I was like, whoops, this is hyper personal. Didn't intend for it to be, was not like trying to tell the story of my childhood or anything like that. I'm like, this is a story about goofballs who fight demons. Ha ha ha. Because it was set in the 90s and because you need details to fill out a story, I just used stuff that I remembered from childhood that was funny to me. And like when you read it back, or when I read it back, I was like, oh yeah, this is like way more personal than anything I've ever written. Like there's a lot of stuff in here about like what I was feeling about at the time and struggles I was having. And yeah, there's like a lot of people from my life in the book. I don't know that they would recognize themselves if they read it, but like the characters are totally just like people I grew up with and people from my family. I think I'm making the book sound heavier than it is. It's like funny. It's goofballs and they fight demons. There's a lot of jokes in it. But,
that's the comic book couples counseling sauce. We take a fun book and then I immediately get super deep about it, and then nobody wants to read it. No, everybody still wants to read it.
But yes, and I don't think you have to know who I am to appreciate the book. There's like not a self-insert character or anything like that. So if you're just like listening to this podcast, you're like, who's this guy? I don't want to read his personal story. Like, it's not that, but yeah, it was kind of interesting to write something like that. And yeah, I don't know. And I think the thing I'm feeling now, like talking about it and getting ready to like go out and promote it, it is a mix of like excitement and knee knocking fear, because I don't do this. I do joke stuff. I do funny stuff. And like having something personal is kind of nerve wracking, because if people reject the book, that means they're rejecting me.
Yeah.
I'm bad. If the book doesn't do well, it's because I suck. No, that's very dramatic, but like it does kind of feel that way. It does feel like people are going to see me in it in a way that they haven't seen me in other stuff I've written.
That's the conversation that gets me excited about youth group. And one of my favorite scenes is when Kay is in the car with her mom, and Kay is being really prickly about feeling like she's being forced to go to church and forced to participate in youth group. And they're kind of going back and forth. And then the mom has a little bit of an emotional meltdown.
Yeah.
And that meltdown ends with Kay asking, like, Mom, do you really for real believe in God? And her mom's answer to that is like, yes. And isn't that like dorky? Mm-hmm. And I love that is in there, because believing in God can feel a little bit like dorky and sure, goofy, and like, wanting to have that conversation is always like kind of like, you always have to like test the waters with that kind of thing, because you don't know what kind of reaction you're going to get. And so I'm wondering, like, is the dorkiness of being genuinely curious about the mystery of the universe and believing in things, is that something that you feel? Is it something is it a relationship with yourself that's always changing?
Yeah, I mean, boy, that is an interesting question. Like, yeah, I think when I was doing that stuff, when I was going to youth group, like I you had your youth group friends and then you had your secular friends or your friends who
Mhm.
were other religions. And like, there's just a lot of like people can have a lot of baggage around religious people or especially Christianity, which has a has a reputation that let's call it a mixed bag. Let's
Right,
call it
right.
a let's just say mixed bag. And you people have had bad experiences with religious people, and people have seen awful religious people do awful things on the news and in the world. So it is like one of those things where if you're someone who are like, well, I'm a reasonable person and I enjoy the fellowship of church and I think Jesus had some cool things to say, meek shall inherit the earth. That which you do to the least of my brothers. Yeah, that's good. That's good. We can all kind of get behind that, right? Like if that's the stuff you like about church and not the uh, other stuff that is bad,
Yeah.
um, it can be kind of weird to talk to people about it, and you can feel uncomfortable, and you might want to like make some apologies for it or apologies for yourself. So yeah, I think with that scene, I wanted to like show someone, and I think Kay's mom in this book is like going through a tough time, recent divorce, trying to like raise the kid on her own, and is like finding a lot of comfort in going to church. And I think that, yeah, I think I just wanted to show a person who is like, I know, I get it. I read the news. Yeah, sure, but this is doing something for me right now and it's helping me. So please don't judge me.
I love that you also parallel Kay's mom's experience with her dad's experience, where he ends up going to a healer and that doesn't
Yeah.
work out the way that he anticipated. But you can
No.
tell that like he is also like seeking. When you're in a tough place and you are seeking, it's extremely vulnerable.
Yeah,
Right.
totally.
So, yeah, I feel like you do a really good job of kind of bringing up the toxicity of church, like through Pastor Doug and some of the how he doesn't like the idea of different demon slayers like working together on a common problem. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? He'd rather just
sure.
like stay separated. I think you do a good job of balancing like there are things that are toxic about the church. A lot of church communities make certain people feel unsafe to share their whole selves and all of that stuff. But you bring the good intentions of people who just want to talk about the mystery of the universe, want to talk
Sure.
about God, want to talk about, principles and that kind of thing. Was striking that balance something that was super intentional for you, or was the balance something you found through the storytelling?
Yeah, it's something I thought a lot about, and I'm not positive that I nailed this.
Mm,
This is something about the book that I think a lot about, and yeah, I kind of go back and forth with our with how we approached it. But like again, like the book's fun. It's funny. It has a
We're
lot of jokes in it. It's goofy. They fight demons. There's fun. There's a little bit of romance. So I'm like, I do want this to be fun. I don't want this to be like a slog. And like if this is too real worldy, then it might stop being fun, right?
right,
Like if the
right.
characters sit around and earnestly talk about all the shitty things religious people have done, like this is no longer fun. Um and so I kind of like we kind of like hand wave some of that stuff and we kind of address it but don't dwell on it. And I I think that helps preserve the kind of the fun and the characters of the book. But I think if you like read this book and you're like, hey, I'm a person who had a shitty experience with religious people and they did shitty things to me, and this book doesn't deal with that seriously, I would say valid criticism, like super valid criticism. And I think that like, yeah, it's just something that like I didn't feel like I personally was equipped to like deal with, not deal with, but just like speak on. And I liked the characters and I liked the story, and I feel like it was a story worth telling, but like, yeah, but it doesn't take place in the real world, right? Like it is its own little world, and it is kind of like the book is kind of like a prayer a little bit. It is like, hey, what if religious people weren't terrible all the time? And they're not. They are not in the real world. Like I know plenty of them who are lovely people who think that we should protect trans kids and that gay people should have all the rights as everyone else and that women should have the right to choose. Like I know plenty of these religious people, but like they're not the loud ones on the news. So I kind of like chose to make most of the people in this story those kinds of like well-meaning religious people who have pretty good takes and are in it for the right reasons. Those like, hey, Jesus had some cool things to say about equality and we like that, and we like the community, and let's all try and make the world a better place. Like I chose to make those the religious characters in the book because that, I think those people are real. I think they exist. And also, yeah, I thought that was the best way to tell the story. So whether or not that is like giving the proper amount of time to how dark religion can be, I understand if you read the book and say you're not grappling with how dark religion can be. I'm like, yeah, sure, we are not, and I understand, and that is a fine criticism.
Just to reassure you,
the book's funny. It's funny. There's a lot of
it's
jokes.
Very funny. It's very funny. I have questions about that as well.
Yeah.
As a person who was raised religious and had a lot of really wonderful religious related experiences, like to me, I found reading Youth Group extremely like healing because I feel like I think we have a lot of opportunities to grapple with how dark and sad and mean and cruel religion can be. I think we're having that conversation all of the time.
Sure.
But I think like having a book that says religious people can also be people who have doubts. They can be people who are overwhelmed. They can be people who don't whole cloth accept everything that the church is saying, So
sure.
like to me, I read the book and I go like, okay, like there is this recognition of like within a church, there can be people who are thinking and feeling all kinds of different things. And also there can be people who leave the church, but still take away really positive and wholesome things from just having that experience.
Yeah, I think that's totally true. And like, I don't go to any kind of organized religious service these days. I consider myself cheerfully agnostic, and I am so fine with that. But like, yeah, like from, I had crummy experiences at church, but I also had some good ones and met some good friends and like learned some stuff that has served me well in my everyday life, even though not all of it has. So yeah, I think, and I think I wanted to tell a story about like people who shut the fuck up about their tiny little differences and work together to prevent the world from being destroyed, like, because, ooh, boy, we can sure sit around and talk about those little fucking differences, can't we? Like, humanity, we can know, and we can kind of sit around and do that. So I think that, like, I think I wanted to show people who like got over that in order to not die.
Mm-hmm.
When Lisa and I have conversations with creators over Zoom, we have a system that we employ to communicate without using words, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we tap each other on the knee. So if Lisa wants to speak,
this is a great. I'm loving this peek behind the
Look,
curtain.
it's behind the scenes.
I love process.
Lisa will tap me twice if she wants in, and when she taps me twice, I then have to prod her. I have to push her to communicate that, yes, I hear it's your turn to talk. And there's been a lot of like back and forth in this conversation because I think Lisa responded so personally to Youth Group and saw so much of herself in it. But for me, I want to speak from my secular point of view.
Please. I'm curious.
Being raised without really any questions about
Mhm.
the life. Like, the biggest concerns I had as a kid is like, well, am I going to get to the theater on Friday? Will my dad take me there so I can see the new Arnold Schwarzenegger movie? Like that,
Sure.
those were my concerns.
Yeah. Your
You're
apostles were Stallone, Schwarzenegger, Van Damme.
damn right. The Expendables.
The Expendables, yes. Were there
uh,
12 Expendables?
there
were.
We must be close to 12 at this point.
There's more than 12, all right, because if you bring in like Terry Crews, and you
Right.
bring
Yeah,
in,
yeah.
Jet Li
You make
and
an excellent point.
Dolph Lundgren.
They're always dumping new Expendables on us.
That's right. That's right. So when I heard that you were doing a book called Youth Group,
Mhm.
I was like, oh, well, that's not. I don't really care about that.
Sure.
But I love Jordan, so I'm going to read his book. I'm a big Buffy the Vampire Slayer fan.
Which is tough, gosh, nowadays.
Sure.
Which is tough. It's almost as tough as wrestling with religion, and organized religion. My Buffy
It's
fandom.
complicated. It's all very complicated.
So
Yeah.
complicated. But I think like what the surprise of reading Youth Group for me was how much empathy you give to every single person in the book, and how eventually I go like, I like these youth group kids too. I like them a lot. I was not expecting them because I was expecting the two-dimensional portrayal of youth groups that I see too often in movies and comics and stories in general. But I also think like a huge win for this story is Bowen's illustrations.
God, yeah,
They are
right?
incredible. And the way that they embrace cartooning and manga was really surprising. And I'm curious about the collaboration process and how the book evolved through that.
Yeah. So gosh, I loved working with Bowen. Bowen really just drew the fuck out of this thing and is a total genius and a pleasure and a wonderful person. Oh gosh, I can't wait to see what Bowen does next. So like basically so we were paired up via Callista Brillin for a second. Callista said, like, I'm going to send you some options, but check out Bowen McCurdy. And so I just looked at it and I was like, let's use Bowen McCurdy. Like, let's go ahead and lock that in if we can. I was so just like blown away by her work. And like, I think Bowen's characters are so gorgeous and they're so expressive. You're right. It's a little bit of manga, but it's also like a little bit of like Disney. There's just a lot of like great influences to make for like expressive characters, who you like, who you just kind of like when you see them. And like, before you start paneling out the book, you send in some just like character models, like here's what they might look like. And like the first time seeing kind of what Bowen cooked up for everybody, like meeting those characters for the first time like that, just in my email inbox was like really knocked me back. It was like, oh wow, these like people have kind of been in my head for a while and they're kind of based on people I knew. And like meeting them in the inbox was like very emotional. It was like, oh wow, this is like, I don't know, they're wonderful. They're kind of like what I expected and kind of and something I didn't expect in a kind of a really cool way. And like, so back to the book being funny, which it is. It's funny.
Very funny, very funny.
Yeah.
You guys are hilarious.
Not a slog. Like, I think there's a lot of talk about like comedy in comics and why it's tough. It's tough. And I think that like there are so many more non-funny comics on the shelves than funny comics. And I think it's just because it's tough and it doesn't like always translate and like jokes don't always work. And like, and I think a lot of people say that it's like about timing, right? Like that's what you hear a lot is like, oh, comedy is tough in comics because you don't have timing. And reading Youth Group, I'm like, I think the comedy works in this because of the acting. I think it is more about acting than it is about timing. Because like, I mean, you can like panel something out and you can add kind of pauses and you can add wordless panels so you can show someone reacting to a joke. But like so much of it is acting and like how the characters are posed and their expressions and who they're on the panel with. And I think that all of Bowen's characters do such beautiful acting. They just like, I don't know, everything is so considered, just where their hands are they in their pockets, where are they looking? And it like I just felt like the art just flattered the jokes really well. I thought Bowen got it. They got what was funny about it, and just like, yeah, like just the it's character based, right? Like the comedy and youth group is pretty character based. It's not a lot of like just random one liners. It's like, look at these goofballs doing their goofball thing, and I think that yeah, Bowen just like got them and just did a really wonderful job of like supporting the joke through like acting, if that makes sense.
Yeah, if you watch the eyes of the characters, like there's a lot going on in
Yeah.
each panel with the eyes.
Mhm.
I was super impressed and compelled by them.
Yeah,
Well-
totally. And it's those little things, and it's just like, it's hard to quantify. It's hard to like explain why something kind of works like in that way and why something doesn't. But yeah, I just think it works really well. And like the little details that they didn't have to do. There is a scene, a very inconsequential table setting scene where someone opens a fridge. They just open a fridge to look in a fridge. And you get a shot from inside the fridge, and everything in there is so wonderfully drawn. Didn't have to do that. Not that important to the story, but just like everything in this fridge looks gorgeous. And I think it like helps the idea that like this is just a normal ass fridge in suburbia where a demon war is taking place. And I think those like lovingly rendering those mundane things just like it supports the fun of the book, where we have a war for humanity going on in a very boring suburb. So yeah, I just like it's just such a pleasure to like watch the book get drawn over its various stages. And yeah, I can't get I'm so happy with the look of it and Bowen's work. Just a goddamn genius.
One of the pages that really worked comedically for me, accomplished by Bowen, is the scene where they're having the interreligious mixer for all of the different youth groups from all of the different religions around. So the people from Temple Beth Israel show up, and the Wiccans show up, and like she distinguishes 3 panels, and you get to see the fashion of each religious group.
Mhm.
And like it was like one of those things that like I'd never really thought about. But then when you see it represented on the page and you go like, oh yeah, that is, I was raised Catholic. That is how Catholics dress.
Yeah.
Like I recognize that. And Bowen was a baby in the 90s. We get to see her baby picture at the end of the book.
Yeah.
Like was the 90s fashions and like those little differences something that you had to express with her? Or were you like, okay, watch Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Wiccans dress like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it's something I did early on, something that Bowen asked for, is she asked for a playlist for every main character. So I went on YouTube and just made little playlists for all the characters. Kay, she's a little spooky, she's a little gothy. So we threw in some L7, we threw in some 9 Inch Nails, we threw in some oh God, what else was on the Kay playlist? Yeah, stuff like that. Stone Temple Pilots, something that like a kind of a gothy kid would be listening to in the 90s. Maybe Stone Temple Pilots doesn't exactly track, but she's not like full goth. She's kind of a fashion goth. Anyway, so and then like Meg is kind of just a like peppy pop fan. So like Hanson, so like Spice Girls. And I think we in turning in these playlists, I was like, oh, like there's just a lot of good fashion in these, right? Like there's a lot of good fashion of the time. Check out the giant pants, check out the puka shell necklaces. There's a little thing we cut from the book where they had enchanted puka shell necklaces that had like a saving charm in them or something. Anyway, maybe if we get to do another one. But yeah, I think that those initial YouTube playlists were full of like just fun references. But also, like, worth mentioning, the 90s are kind of back fashion-wise. And you see that Sublime Sun shirt everywhere that every stoner at my high school had. And, like, I think if you just are walking around in Brooklyn and see a bunch of like cool 25-year-olds drinking organic wine, they are probably kind of sort of dressed like they were from the 90s. Like
Yeah.
you will see a lot of puka shells and big pants, bucket hats.
Yeah, they're
Can you
back in
believe it?
a big
Everybody's
way.
cruising around in a bucket hat. Everyone looking like they're from Hackers. Yeah.
Oh,
So
God.
I think it was a combination of like, we looked at some kind of cool references, but also just like the stuff just comes back around in cycles. So, not hard to see a 90s looking person out on the streets.
One of my favorite recurring bits was all of the religious versions of popular pop songs that
Oh,
show
yeah.
up in this book. That was not something that we did in the Catholic Church. We were
Sure.
not there was very little like social pressure to make it look cool, because it just can't look cool. I love the scene where they go to the convent to meet the convent of demon slayers, and they burst into their version of what was it?
Smash Mouth.
Yeah, their version of walking on the sun, but it's like walking with the sun, parenthetical
S-O-N,
of God.
S-O-N, son of God.
And the Catholics like standing around looking at them like they
Yeah.
are absolutely bonkers. And you include like demonology from these different sects. Was there like a lot of research you had to put into like distinguishing like these different religions properly, or was it something just from your life experience you felt like, okay, I've got a handle on this?
I did do a lot of research for this. I did want to like get the religions right. Part of the mission with this book when I started writing it is like, okay, let's not make the Christians pure jokes, right? Like let's make them actual people who are funny. And then I'm like, oh well, I should just that should just be a value that extends to the book, right? Like we have other religions, so like don't make anybody a joke, or don't make them like a pure joke, right? Like make sure that they can be funny, they can be like wrong, they can be kind of self-parodic, but don't just make them a punchline, right? Like so I did want to get all the stuff right, and I didn't want the like because there's the main characters have the experience that's most similar to mine, so I know that stuff is right, but I did want to get the other stuff right too. So like I did have to do a lot of Catholic research, and honestly, I did not want to offend the Wiccans, so I sat down with the Wiccan stuff. I have so much Wiccan research that didn't even get into the book. So I'm like, if I come out of this with Wiccans enjoying it or not being mad at me, I have won. So I did sit down and research that stuff and make sure that like everything people say is at least rooted in some sort of thing that's real or a tradition that's real. So I hope that there's no like cartooniness in people's religious ceremonies in this.
Another aspect of the book that I really enjoyed is the amount of character and personality that you bring to the foes of the story, the antagonists, the demons. What was the conversation around designing their look and their personality?
Sure. For look, I was playing a Doom game at the time, so I sent Bowen a lot of screenshots from the Doom game I was playing at the time. I believe it was Doom Eternal. Those are great. If you're looking for a fun shooter, the rebooted Doom games are a ton of fun. And that game series has a very like over the top, rooted in religion lore, so I thought it kind of fit. Their version of hell is so crazy and over the top, so I wanted to borrow a little bit of that. So I just sent Bowen a bunch of Doom monsters and say, this is kind of what's in my head right now. For their personalities, like I didn't want them to be, I wanted them to be kind of betas a little bit, like not the like Trigon destroyer of worlds. And I like those kinds of villains, and I like those kind of world destroyer sitting on their throne type villains, but I wanted these demons to be a little scrappier, a little more disorganized. You kind of figure out what their plan is as the book goes, but they're like an insurrection of foot soldiers, kind of. They are just these kind of characters who are kind of betas in hell, and they're looking for a place where they belong, and they're trying to take over Earth because they feel like they don't fit in hell. So yeah, I think that was the kind of spin I wanted to put on demons. Yeah. So yeah, this this ain't the I'm not don't think I'm blowing anybody's mind here by saying like the journey of the heroes parallels the journey of the villains. Everybody's kind of just like looking for their place, and some people are going about it better than others, and everybody kind of feels like they don't belong. Like when you're a kid, when you're a teenager, you're just like, what am I doing here? Who are these people? Get me out of here. So yeah, I think I wanted the heroes and the villains to be on kind of similar journeys.
Something I feel like I haven't seen done in comics or in movies. Like what I think of is what I consider like the X-Files folly, where like Scolder
That's their ship name. If there were ship names when
Yep.
the X-Files was around.
Oh, I have the slash fiction up here right now. It's just playing all the
Yes.
time.
Slash fiction and swing dancing. It's all
that's all
in
happening.
a little locked closet in our brains.
They're Lindy hopping until they make out. That's
oh my
it.
God, right?
Scully sees aliens all of the time, and yet she still holds on to like her staunch skepticism, which always felt weird to me. Like, what's going on? Where I feel like in your book, both Kay and Cortland have seen and experienced demons, and the conflict with them is not like, well, what actually is? The conflict is rather like, well, what does this all actually mean? What does it actually mean to me?
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, like, have I interpreted that message right? And does it reflect how you've ended up after having like your youth group experience and then kind of growing into your own like worldview?
Yeah, I think I wanted people to read the book and not like, okay, like when you watch like exorcism stuff, like when you watch demon stories or read demon stories, a lot of them can have this like maybe inadvertent message like the Bible is real. See, it was all real. And I kind of didn't want that to be something people walked away with. Not like, oh, in the world of this story, the Bible is 100% real. I wanted it to be ambiguous. I wanted like there to be a lot of questions about who the demons are, where they came from. I didn't want to just say like the religious people were right. There were demons. Repent, repent. Like I wanted it to be more ambiguous, and I think it is. I think we land somewhere that's a little more mysterious, and like the characters don't necessarily have to believe in the Bible if they fight demons. Like there's demons, there's evil, like it exists, but people believe different things and people go about fighting that evil differently. So I think I wanted to present a world where like there's some Bible-y stuff happening, but that doesn't mean, there was a Noah's Ark or whatever. So yeah, I think that was kind of a mission with the book, was not to like root it in one specific theology. And yeah, and I think that is kind of like something that I think about. And I think we've talked a little bit about this, but like, hey, there's great stuff in religion and there's not great stuff in religion. And I think even if you are someone who goes to church every week and tithes and has a Bible study group, there's probably stuff you disagree with your church about. There's stuff you disagree with your friends and family about. And like, so everybody, we're all just interpreting it, we're all just interpreting it in our own ways, and certainly the religious people you see screaming on TV are not representative of every religious person in your neighborhood. So like we're all interpreting it, right? And we're all going to do it a little bit differently, and we're all going to have different opinions. And yeah, so I think that's kind of where I'm at, is like I learned some great stuff from my time in my goofballs youth group, and I didn't like all of it. I don't like all of it, but there was stuff that was useful to me at the time, and then still is. So yeah, I think that was something we wanted to be a theme in the book, of like the mysterious personalness of faith. Like it is very personal. Like everybody, even if you don't believe in anything, like that's still very personal, right? Like people's atheism can be very personal and unique and something that is special to them. So yeah, I just wanted like every character to like they're all going at it in their own way. And just because they are different doesn't mean you can't fight demons together, you know?
When I was growing up, I didn't go to Catholic school. You know, I went to public school, and I got my like one time a week religious education, and then we would go to church on Sunday, every Sunday. But I remember when I was a kid, and you know, I was raised on the knowledge, okay, you know, Jesus was casting out demons.
Right.
And I just, inside of my head, as I was growing up, I was like, I wouldn't have described it this way at the time, but like, I kind of just thought of it as like a literary metaphor. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like Jesus was casting out demons metaphorically. You know, they didn't really understand mental health or whatever. And just like, that's how I thought about it. And then I remember being told for the first time that it like really, I really heard what they were saying was like, oh no, demons are real. Like I was being told, oh no, demons are real. And I was flabbergasted.
Sure.
I was like truly? Like that's what we think?
Right.
And I feel like sometimes a lot of the discussion around religion is going like, well, where does the literal truth end and the metaphor begin? And I feel like youth group really points to that question in a really specific way, where you can read this book and go like, well, these demons are literally true. They're in this world. You know what I mean? But it is still, as we're reading it, a metaphor. You know what I mean?
Sure.
You know, of just like, we have conflicts in this world that are urgent, you know, that are affecting people's lives every day, that are killing people, that are ostracizing people, that are, you know, oppressing people. And we're quibbling over something that we're actually not going to know the truth of probably ever, or after we're dead and we do not care. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, so I just really want to congratulate you on being able, because I really haven't found that anywhere else to my satisfaction, to be able to go like, okay, you know, like it's a metaphor, right? I don't know.
Yeah. I think thanks. That was part of the mission, definitely. And like yeah, it is. I also I could totally relate, because I think when I started learning about the Bible, my assumption is that a lot of this was metaphor. Oh, well, like the world created in 7 days, right? That's, you know, a day. What is a day to God? And maybe that means evolution slowly cooled the earth and the dinosaurs were a day. And that's just how they understood it at the time, right? Like a long time ago, a day. And then people are like, oh no, literally 7 days, literally 7 days. And if you think that it's not 7 days, you're wrong. And you've been indoctrinated by atheists, right? Like the fact that you got that messaging ever anywhere was insane, right? The like, you should not look at this as fable or something, but as just you have to look at it literally, and all literally, like wild. So yeah, I think yeah. So I think the demons are like not super subtle stand-ins in this book for like all the shit that happens in the world, and kind of what happens when, you know, we work together, because we have to that's the only way anything's going to get done. So and I don't want it to seem like, you know, we're letting shitty religious people off the hook, but also wanted to show people who understood that even though they don't believe the same thing, they had similar goals.
Jordan, we had a great time with youth group, and I think that Lisa and I had two very different experiences reading youth group, and I imagine that the people who pick up this comic will have a variety of experiences reading it as well. And I think that's what's so freaking exciting about it.
Yeah, hopefully. I do think that if you were a youth group kid, there will be just a lot of familiar cringe, and in a good way, funny cringe. But hopefully you'll see a little bit of yourself for the people you grew up with in these characters. But yeah, if you you know, just grew up worshiping at the altar of Chuck Norris and the American Ninja guy, Who's he? Who's the guy? Who's directing that show?
Michael Dudikoff, baby.
There you go. Okay, one of the greats, a lesser saint at the pantheon for sure. Yeah. Hopefully you can. I think you can still have fun with the book, and it is just funny. And hey, religious people are goofballs, right? With the
Yeah,
book.
absolutely. And I think
isn't
also
that diplomatic about that aspect. So.
If you're a comics head, I think you're going to have a great time with it because, again, Bowen McCurdy's art is really great. Character-wise, we didn't really even mention sequentially. The action in this comic is communicated expertly.
Yeah.
And there are some really amazing page turns, especially as we get towards the climax of the book.
And we didn't even talk about Cortland, who is a character we don't want to spoil. So we didn't bring him up, but I know that people are just going to love that kid.
Yeah, Cortland's great. He's the kind of bro-y stoner, maybe former stoner, we're not sure. His playlist was all, when I gave Bowen the playlist, his playlist was 311, Sublime, Smash Mouth, of course. So yeah, that was if you grew up with one of those guys, that's him.
Sure did. Jordan, thank you so much. Point folks listening to where they can find you online to continue this conversation and also experience all the other really rad podcasts that you do.
Yeah, I've got a website. It's jordanmorris.net. You can see, you can get book links there. You can get links to podcasts. Jordan Jesse Go, my chat show with Jesse Thorne. Free with ads, of course. Yeah. My movie chat show with Emily Fleming, which y'all guested on recently, and were great. We talked about Tank Girl. Very fun conversation. If you like filth, tune into that show and episode. So, yeah, that was a blast. I was so glad y'all came on for that. And
us too. That's so fun.
We've bought Tank Girl comics since the conversation.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Really? Yeah.
We got to get in on that Tank Girl. Be real fans.
I regret not bringing up how Tank Girl was wearing a candy necklace for fashion. I totally did that. I remember going to Warped Tour or HF Festival wearing a candy necklace.
Oh, boy.
Sweat is sticking to my neck.
And yet we're married.
It worked with the list. If we get to do another youth group, it should be set at Warped Tour. It should be an all Warped Tour sequel.
This is kind of open-ended where you could have multiple volumes. Like, it's a very satisfying volume in and of itself, but if there are more youth groups, I would be so excited.
Yeah, me too. I would love to do more. Yeah, I think the book has a beginning, middle, and an end, and you can read it and you don't need to know anything else, and you could just have a fun time reading the book, I think. But yeah, I think would love to do more. There's lots of, again, we need to show their hellish night at the demonically possessed Warped Tour. I think everybody needs to see that. Yeah, so jordanmorris.net, that's my website. You can find podcasts there. You can find links and stuff to all the books, etc. And yeah, and I'm imagining if folks are listening to this show, they have a LCS that they love where they know the folks there. So do please give Youth Group a pre-order. Have them put it on your pull list. If you have an indie bookstore you love, have them pre-order it there. Boy, howdy, those pre-orders sure help books. Do we know why? Not really, but they do. So if it sounds cool to you, definitely give us a pre-order. We would love if you did that. Request it at your local library. That's also something you could do. And she comes out on the 16th, July 16th. We're super excited, and get it if you think it sounds cool.
Congratulations, Jordan, and thanks again for coming back and chatting comics with us.
Thank you. Yes, I always love chatting with y'all. These are so much fun, and yes, happy to do it anytime. Thank you.
And there you go. Our thanks once again to Jordan Morris for coming on and talking Youth Group, which again comes out from First Second Books on July 16th.
I literally cannot wait for you all to read this book because I do want to have a full spoilers conversation with somebody about this book because I love it so much. I like where we ended the conversation about okay, what people are really arguing about is where does the metaphor stop and the literal truth begin?
Something you've been kind of noodling on, obsessing over for the last couple of years.
Right. And I find myself thinking about this quote that I got from Pete Holmes, the comedian, but he's quoting Barry Taylor, AC/DC's road manager. I had to Google the original quote, but the quote is, God is the blanket that we throw over the mystery to give it shape. Nobody knows the mystery of the universe. saying that you're certain about the mystery of the universe is like a toxic impulse, but we have to have a way to talk about it and interpret it. And also, we talk about how we're all interpreting the mystery of the universe differently, but in actuality, every story is interpreted differently by different people. And I think that that's what makes stories fun.
Right. There's a third creator with every story, or like there's an extra creator, right? We've talked about this recently. I can't remember with who. In being the reader, you're contributing, you're creating the story along with the author and the artist.
Right. As you fold it into your existence. And the example I love to use is Star Trek. One of the main tenets of Star Trek to me is the idic.
Yeah.
Infinite diversity in infinite combinations.
Right.
And I feel like, you can't have Star Trek without that. But then you talk to other Star Trek fans and they do not believe in that thing.
Yeah. It's weird.
It is super weird. But I think that the more willing we are to have that conversation with each other, the more rich our lives become.
Yeah. Like we were talking about this. I'm now going on to another tangent.
Please.
I think we were talking about this with Vactor when we guested on his YouTube show. But recently, a truck drove by me and it was all decked out in stormtrooper colors.
Oh, yeah.
And, the Imperial symbol was everywhere. And on the hood, it said Imperial AF. And I'm like, did you even listen to Yoda, man?
They're the bad guys. They're the bad guys.
I just find it so funny and baffling and strange. And I just love how we all read stories differently. And we go like, you know what? The Empire, they were right.
Yeah.
I don't want to party in that van, my friend.
I love Jordan talking really openly about, he goes, I hope that I left all of these characters in a good place. I hope that I'm not saying something that I don't agree with by accident. This is not a spoiler. Not every one of these characters ends this book with the same answer to the mystery.
Yeah.
But they do leave this story with a sense of profound responsibility for taking care of humanity and a love for each other, which I think is isn't that just the goal? Isn't that just the life goal for human beings as a whole?
And to reaffirm what Jordan Morris says several times during our conversation, the comic is also very fun.
And funny.
Yeah, it's a good time. It's a good read. You're going to enjoy it. Again, because we like the book so much, we want to tell you one more time when it's coming out. July 16th, a month from now. From
Order
first,
it now.
Second books. You should pre-order. Pre-orders are important.
Wouldn't you be so mad at yourself that you forgot this book existed and then you read it way far in the future? That's also great.
Yeah, pre-orders are also what guarantee sequels.
Yeah, that's true.
Right?
And I need more.
Yeah, we need follow-ups. If you've been following us on socials at CBCC Podcast, you saw recently that we did a major announcement of the next batch of episodes.
Yay!
One of them was a great surprise to Brad and Lisa, and that is a conversation between Sean Phillips and Jacob Phillips. It's going to be our Father's Day special episode next week. You should know that Sean Phillips is the frequent collaborator of Ed Brubaker, and Jacob Phillips is Sean Phillips' son, and he's been coloring Sean's work ever since My Heroes Have Always Been Junkies, the criminal novella.
Which would be a great read to prepare for this conversation.
Yeah, because we really dig into those early days of their collaboration. And since then, of course, Jacob Phillips has gone on to create some really rad comics on his own, most notably That Texas Blood and the Enfield Gang Massacre, which he's been on the podcast before talking about.
Hopefully you've read those already.
Yeah, but this is a really special conversation. I don't think Sean and Jacob have ever done an interview together before.
Yeah, so I'm so excited. This one is in the can.
It's in the can. It's done. Comes out next week. It's following the heels of this Jordan Morris conversation. And then after that, in 2 weeks, we are going to have a massive Minor Threats extravaganza with writers Jordan Bloom, Patton Oswalt and Kyle Starks.
Yes.
And then after that, we are going to kick off July with a mother-son conversation. Matt Kint is coming back to the podcast, this time bringing his mom, Margie Kraft Kint, talking about their Dark Horse books, Flux House collaboration, Guilt Frame. The first issue is massive. It's like 64 pages. Lisa and I have read it already. It's a beautiful, intricately designed murder mystery not to be missed.
And don't forget to check out Free with Ads. We did an episode with Jordan Morris and Emily Fleming about Tank Girl. Many of you have listened to that already and were scandalized by my filthy mouth.
Yeah. Last week we did a bunch of guest spots, so you better be on the lookout for future episodes of the 2000 AD Thrillcast. Lisa was talking about Full Tilt Boogie, and I was talking about the Hell Trekkers. We did 2 episodes. I have no idea when those episodes are going to be dropped, so you need to subscribe to that. You should also subscribe to the Wizards podcast, because I guested on that show, talking about the Wizard Magazine 1999 X-Men special. And then finally, Lisa and I guested on Vactor's This Comic Cooks YouTube channel, talking about X-Men 97 in totality. And of course, on June 23rd at 4 o'clock at the Alamo Drafthouse in Winchester, Virginia, we are screening Green Lantern in anticipation of Deadpool and Wolverine. And we have not sold many tickets. So
This Ryan Reynolds guy, I just don't think he's going to take off.
I don't think there are a lot of people who are like, let's watch Green Lantern ironically, but maybe they're going to show up. Maybe they're going to buy those tickets at the last minute. I think Green Lantern actually has a lot of interesting value. I love Kilowog. I love everything with Sinestro in that film. Taika Waititi does an acting performance in that movie as Ryan Reynolds' sidekick.
And who doesn't like eating pizza in the dark?
Yeah. Join us, please.
And if you're a patron, don't forget, get in touch with Brad and or Lisa so we can get your ticket. You've practically already paid for it because you're a patron.
Yeah.
So you might as well show up, give us a high five. You don't even have to stay for the whole movie.
No. Get on a plane, get in a car, make a trip to Alamo Drafthouse in Winchester, Virginia on June 23rd for Green Lantern.
Okay, Brad, let's get out of here because I have to finish my Temptations chart. What do you think I can put in place of desecrating the graves of my enemies?
Playing the flute.
Yeah. Bacon cookies, maybe. Where can our listeners send their words of affirmation to you?
You can find me on most social medias at MouthDork. If you have words of affirmation for our logo, you can send them to Aaron Prescott at A Cool Hand Fluke. And if you have some words of affirmation for our radical banner art and show posters, send them to Karen Chap at Karen_X-Men fan. Lisa, where can our listeners send their words of affirmation to you?
I'm always accepting words of affirmation at Sidewalk Siren on Instagram and Twitter. If you'd like to spend more quality time with us, you can subscribe to us on Podbean, Spotify, YouTube, Audible, Apple Podcasts, or whatever app you prefer. We took the word prefer out because I can't say it. Whatever app you choose, we're everywhere. If you'd like to get exclusive, this has been a tough episode because I had to say prefer and rural. Those are my 2 worst words.
Yeah, okay.
If you'd like to get exclusive, you can join our Patreon where you'll get more content, including weekly bonus episodes.
If you'd like to reach out and touch us electronically, you can email the podcast, cbccpodcast@gmail.com. You can visit our website, comicbookcouplescounseling.com, or follow us on all the socials at CBCC Podcast.
You can give us...
What
I don't know. I'm shutting down. You can give us a gift of 5 stars on Audible or Apple Podcasts. And if you'd like to do an act of service, why not write a review of the show while you're there? We're fluent and receptive in all 5 love languages. It really warms our hearts and helps the pod.
And we're not going to redo any of that? We're going to keep all that?
We might. Let's see.
Okay, well, so until next time, friends, keep your love tank full.
And your psychic rapport open.
Doopy doopy bum bum ba bum bum ba.
Okay, Brad, I think I better finish my Temptations chart. What do you think I should do instead of... Oh, I had a good one.
Finger banging?
No.
Oh, free with ads. Seems like you know all about it.